Another day has brought us to an opportunity that we have as students, as teachers, so we can do one or two things to help ourselves, bring ourselves up to a level that we ourselves will feel proud of what we do in the classroom as teachers. Now that is why we are going through what we might call something that is laborious, but it will pay off, that we know that we are teaching, and our teaching, because we have planned, and our plan has scanned through the cognitive levels, Bloom's taxonomy levels of cognitive understanding, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, and the rest. We become satisfied with ourselves, and so we were trying to take them one by one and explain them. We have said that at the comprehension there are 4 elements. A definition is one part of it, and a definition requires students to describe a term or a concept in their own words. It is different from repeating dictionary definition. When a child does that, he has not defined. A child who is able to recite or repeat dictionary definition has not defined by our understanding, which is a definition being one part of comprehension. The child has not defined it. So we stress using the child's own words. It is only when the child has been able to do this well at the comprehension level that the child can do application. And the application level involves using information to arrive at a solution or a problem. Now, in its operation, we emphasize a student is given an unfamiliar problem, and he or she must apply or use appropriate principle or method to arrive at. Because the how, I repeat, the how is more important to the teacher than the answer. Now, the application category has 2 steps or 2 processes. Look at the 2. Step 1. Application problem as 2-step process. The student encounters a problem, step 1. Then the child is able to recognize it as a certain type of a problem. So he goes to step 2 and selects the solution. And then he solves the problem. So application level, application stage goes through this 2-step process. The student you must give a problem so he encounters it. Then the child should be able to recognize what you have given him or her as a certain type. And so when he has done that recognition, then he or she will be able to select the alternative, the solution, and then solve the problem. If this is not done, the child cannot do application. The analysis is the reverse, or it involves taking apart complex items such as speeches, written communication, or machines, and explaining their underlying organization. So look at the 2 categories of the analysis level. It has to do with identifying issues, then identifying the implications. I often tell my students, the meaning of something is not the same as the implication of something. What does this imply? The person is not asking you for the meaning. So we must be careful how we understand some of these words. Identifying issues in this type of analysis operation, the student should be able to subdivide a broad communication into a constituent part. That is where we are saying breaking apart. So it entails the discovering of a skeleton. If you use an orange or a purple, whatever, it demands that the child is cutting the thing into pieces to get the skeleton. That is analysis. So analysis is the reverse, or it involves taking apart complex items such as the speeches that I have said already. You are written communication or machines, and then you are explaining. So the implication is there. Identifying issues, the skeleton is there. How do we state implications? Stating implications requires the following. Your student must be able to identify the relationship between two propositions. The relationship may be expressed in terms of one, influence, association, necessary consequences, and it needs to be stated directly. Question type, for example. What are some of the motives behind, for example, President Kufuor's invitation or poverty alleviation? What were the motives behind this? It requires the student to show relationship, the consequences of something. So, analysis, summing up, like we have said some time ago, is breaking a whole number, something into its constituent parts, so you can have the skeleton. Whereas analysis is breaking apart, synthesis is bringing the parts together. We are recapping. And the key of synthesis is creativity. The key of synthesis is creativity, because in synthesizing we form a new unique entity. It is therefore important to know that this category may be the most distinctive, because it is very easy to recognize. When the child has been able to make something new, you can just look at it and say, wow, this child is creative. So it is the process of combining parts in such a way as to constitute one, a pattern or a structure that did not exist before. In fact, seamstress, tailors, sculptures, in fact, the artists, these people, you can see them as being in the creative arts. They create. Their imagination is so sharp, and so you can see them in the work that they have produced. So let us as teachers encourage creativity. Give our students the leeway for creative expression. At times we are too protective and punitive, and we stifle creativity in our children. We do not allow them to try. So many parents are overprotective, and such parents do not expect that their children will bring out any new thing. because they can never be creative. As teachers, we must encourage our children. Now, synthesis can be subdivided in terms of the type of processing involved and then the products of those operations. For example, its uniqueness. In one type of synthesis, the product is a unique type. Example, an essay, a speech, an original art form, a poem, a painting, a musical composition. These are unique things that you can see. One category is that in that division. The second category involves developing a plan or proposed set of operations to be performed. All the operations must result in the recreation of a tangible product. Tangible product. And then the creativity displayed in creating it are two distinguishing characteristics of the synthesis level. Tangible, you can see it there. And then how it has been done. You find that this is distinguishing characteristic. The how of it. Somebody has woven, you go to a kente weaver, he's sitting in the loom and see what has come out using the threads to bring up a product. So there are abstractions. The third type of synthesis involves creating the set of abstraction relations. This typically involves working with a phenomena or data and forming patterns that did not exist before. If, for example, students of the university here, SRC, they pick up constitutions, one from the United States, one from Britain, one from Japan, and then they are able to formulate a principle for drawing up a workable constitution for their school. They have used some other information from somewhere. These are abstractions, but they have come up with a synthesis of what they have taken from different sources and coming out with a workable one. Valley View, for example, we did something some time ago at the education department here before it became a school. We wanted to write a curriculum for secondary education. We went to Winneba, we went to Cape Coast. These two were the institutions that were training teachers. And we brought copies of their syllabus. We sat down critically and then made a synthesis of the two and brought a novelty. In fact, when the National Accreditation Board came for this visit to approve the program, the chair said, and I quote, "This syllabus or curriculum that you have drawn is a novelty. I see it as a synthesis of Cape Coast and Winneba." That is what we mean by an abstraction aspect of synthesis. Evaluation is another category, and this requires making decisions on controversial topics and then substantiating these decisions with sound reasons. And I beg, I'm familiar with the writings of St. Paul. If you want to evaluate and substantiate on controversial things, read the writings of Paul. For example, his argument on the resurrection, that when a person dies, he can resurrect. He goes on to tell people, and he uses natural phenomena. And at one point, he's telling his hearers that you are fools. When you plant, the seed that you planted, does it not die before it shoots up and bring up something new? And so he makes a very solid argument that as we have in the natural, so we have in the spiritual. You can read his letter to Philemon, one chapter book, and he's sending a runaway slave back to his master. And look at how he goes on with the tact and the argument. So as teachers, when we are teaching our children to make evaluation, we are saying that we must teach them, bring them up so they can substantiate on what they say with sound argument and reasons. We don't just say any blanket statement and that is it. We need to substantiate. So what creativity is to synthesis, evaluation is also another area that is very interesting. Evaluation questions ask students to state their judgment. But as they state their judgment, they must give a criterion or criteria upon which their judgment is based. So to function at the evaluation level, the student must do the following. One, the student must be able to set up appropriate standard or values. Determine how closely the idea or object meets the standard or the value. And so the evaluation category will project the analysis category into another glorious dimension, because the children can now set for themselves. That is why they are setting for themselves. You, the teacher, you have been able to do that because you are evaluating. You always say in your objective setting, by the end of this lesson, the child must be able to at least. That statement at least means the least performance which is acceptable. You are evaluating the child, so you have given a criterion by which you are going to assess that child. So anytime you write a performance objective and you bring the statement or the phrase at least, remember, you have put it there because you want to evaluate the performance of the child after you have taught. Don't forget. An evaluation question therefore requires the students, one, to analyze and make a judgment. And because you have taken them through analysis category, they won't find it difficult again. And the criteria for judgment must be identified. The quality of the evaluation response should be graded according to how well the student has met the criteria or the criterion set. And so, after you have been taught and you have been graded, students come out and tell you, Sir, I went to check my grade and I had F or C plus or C minus. Yes, you had it because you are being graded according to how well you met the criteria for assessment. So when you get the C, I have not given you the C. I am not giving you the B minus. You had it because you worked for it. That is how far you met the criterion for assessment. I hope students will put this into their minds, that no lecturer will give a C or a C minus to a student when the student deserves a B plus or a higher grade. For my number of years of experience in Valley View, when students get A or A minus, they have got it. By any moment they get F or C minus, it is the teacher, the lecturer who gave it to him or her. How can that thinking be true? You got A, that one you got it, you work for it. But when you got C minus, it is the lecturer who gave it to you. Please, let us change that attitude. Because an evaluation response should consist of two parts. The student should establish criterion or criteria on which to base that judgment. So I'm a teacher. I am basing what my judgment is on the criterion set for evaluation. And so I'm using the prescribed criteria to state the judgment. And so if you look at our course outline, it has been tabulated. This is how students are going to be graded. 80 to 100, A. This to this, A minus. This to that, B plus. And so your raw marks will indicate your B plus or your C or your A minus. It is there. And then how do you get there as a teacher or a lecturer? There's a marking scheme. And so as I teach, I am drawing a marking scheme. We have talked about classical conditioning. There's a marking scheme on the questions there. We have talked about Piaget, about Thorndike, about B.F. Skinner, theories of learning. So when I'm drawing a scheme to mark a criterion set, I'm using the facts that we have all studied and prepare a marking scheme that will be used to mark students' scripts or whatever answers they have given. And from what they have given as answers, they are graded. Don't forget this truth. So the synthesis, how it operates. Look at this thing on your PowerPoint, and then you know how it operates. There's an expected outcome, the process is there, the plan for an experiment is there, specification for a new thing, I've specified it. The building process is there, and then at the end of it, we have a house. Teaching, a teaching unit. The process is the teaching. What is the expected outcome of teaching? A change of behavior. That is how it should operate. So, using the taxonomy as a planning tool, we summarize that. Provide a range of objectives. Sequence your objectives from simple to complex. Show the relationships of your objectives. Then plan for logical and sequential activities. And build on previous learning, RPK. And then the appropriate levels of instruction and your assessment. If you do this, go over and over again with this, using the taxonomy as a planning tool. Go through these bullets, providing a range of objectives, because you don't set just one objective in teaching. But when you do that, you need to sequence your objectives from simple to complex, and I'm sure you know why you should start from simple to complex. And then you must show a relationship of your objectives. If you set an objective that is of cognitive level, how is that related to the Sakamoto session and the other domain? How logical and sequential are the activities that you are providing in your teaching? Are you building on the previous knowledge, previous learning of students? And do you set appropriate assessment tools for your instruction as well as for the assessment of the students as they learn? Assessment of, assessment for, assessment as learning. Do you do that? Don't forget the preposition. Assessment for, assessment as. Don't forget this preposition, because the moment you bring this preposition, they change meaning. Design your instruction and your assessment to attain congruency. Identify the text for requisite learning before adding new information, and meet your individual differences as much as possible, because we know that there are individual differences. Now, there's something that I want to call your attention to, so we will not forget. We said the other time that there are planning stages. Instructional planning is cyclic. You remember we have said that some time ago. Now, we have said, let me go over that again, that the 3 stages, we have the pre-planning stage, we have the unit and lesson planning stage, then we have the planning of and the post-instructional activity stage. We have said that one. It calls for the teacher to be able to help break his planning into these 3 stages that you find in that picture, in that diagram that I showed in the lesson some time ago. Now, because you have this at the back of your mind, if you plan, you can make appropriate adjustments, but if you don't plan, you can't. For example, you planned a lesson for, say, 20 students in the class, but when you went to the class, you had 60 students. Will you make adjustments or you will not make adjustments? I once was teaching a literature class. The first day that I attended the class, my students were 5. I don't know what happened. The next morning in my class at 9:45, the 5 had jumped to 50 students in the class. Need I make any adjustments or just take it for granted that all my preparation for the 5 will meet the 50? No. So planning tools should therefore be thought of as guiding principles. My planning tools, they just guide me. They are just aids. They are not blueprints to systematic instruction. No. So to teach a lesson effectively, the teacher must allow for flexible delivery. I repeat, to teach a lesson effectively, the teacher must allow for flexible delivery because of unpredictable things that will happen. During the actual classroom interaction, the teacher needs to make adaptations. You are adding artistry to each day's plan that you made before you enter the classroom. And therefore, you realize that we have said the picture there, the diagram there, depicts the process of lesson planning as cyclic. I think I'm clear on this. We said something on goals. And let me also say 1 or 2 things here again. We have said that the goals are, or the goals provide instructional direction. So you take the goal of a country. They are only providing direction. The teacher's role is to sift through the goals, then establish your own priorities and select those that you think are important. Please, that is why the teacher's planning is cumbersome. It is not just easy. Because the most valuable take precedence in the classroom. It is not the goal that is taught. Let me repeat. It is not the goal that is taught. The goal is simply the framework within which content, skills, processes, and attitudes are taught. I think I must repeat that. It is not the goal that is taught. Ghana wants to produce responsible citizens. That is not what you are going to teach. The goal is simply the framework within which your content, you chose a topic, the content of that topic, the skills that you are going to choose to deliver, the processes that you are going to go through, the attitudes that you are going to build in the students. It is just this. It is the framework within which all these things are taught. So the goals are abstractions. They just inspire your action. Goals are abstractions that inspire action. They are never completely attained. No. But objectives, by contrast, are stated as action elements. That is why we say behavioral. And they come out from the goals. So objectives are the means by which we seek to achieve our goals. Probably let me give you an example. All children in Ghana will start school ready to learn. All children of school-going age must have or be given access to school. This is a goal. Accessibility to the children. Accessibility to education, open to all children of school-going age. It's a goal. Education will be free and compulsory. FQ. Fee-free compulsory basic education. This is a goal. It is a goal. And they direct the action of the teacher. When, for example, we say every school district will promote school community involvement in the education of the child, the social, the emotional, and the intellectual growth of the child. This is a goal. So because we want to promote the social, the emotional, and the intellectual growth of the child, you, the teacher, will have to sit down and from this goal, write an objective which will combine the intellectual growth is cognitive domain, the emotional is affective domain, and the social goes with cognitive, affective as well as Sakamoto. So that's why we have discussed already that in planning our lessons, we need to take into consideration the three domains of operation. What are some of the cardinal principles that we must follow as we go through planning? 1. The student's health. His health needs should be addressed. And so one of the tasks of a school head is people's health, students' health in the school. And you, the teacher, as in loco parentis, must seek the health and address the health needs of the child. Secondly, there's a command of fundamental intellectual process that we must address, and that is why we are always emphasizing the cognitive development, the mental activity of the child. The child has come from a home, and so we must seek the child's welfare and make him or her feel at home in school. Vocational education is needed. When children are at home, they are doing something their parents also do. Vocation, they are doing something with their hands. So the Sakamoto level, when they come to school, the teacher must not forget. Civic education. Some years back, there was a small book written by one Al Hassan, Courtesy for Girls, Courtesy for Boys. Nowadays, you meet your student, if you are not teaching the student, he doesn't say hello, he doesn't greet you, he passes by. But in our society, greeting has been part of us, saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening to somebody that you meet. But now we have become so individualistic that we see somebody pass by and we just walk on. Civic education, very, very important. Leisure. Some teachers, they go, and if you talk about taking children to the field for PE, no, you have said something that should not be said. They have no time for that for their students. But all work and no play, we know. Some of us are not bothered with the ethical behavior development of our children. But that is the seventh principle. Ethical character development is paramount. Because if you teach a child and you do not address the ethical aspect of that child, morality, what are we therefore as teachers? And so we must not forget this, that as teachers we have something to do with our students. So when we are doing all this, then we are saying that we can translate goals into objectives. Translating the goals into objective setting takes planning. In the planning, you need to identify and then define your instructional objectives if you are translating a goal into objective setting. It does what? It takes planning to, 1, identify, 2, define. Define what? Instructional objectives. We need to do that. So we begin with a broad goal, then work toward a specific objective. So a deductive process from general to particular. The goal is the general one, and we arrive at a particular, which is the objective. So we can do a cognitive domain where we deal with the recall or recognition and all that we have done from the cognitive. I've taken you through that, to the affective domain, the area that concerns attitudes. We are using the taxonomy, Bloom taxonomy. We have done that. And so if we are able to do all this, we will say to ourselves, yes, by the grace of God, we have, or we do not go to the classroom to waste the time of our students. And so as teachers, in this lesson, my emphasis has been on planning for survival. And we are using goals to plan, and we zoom it down to writing objectives. When we come to lesson planning itself, planning a lesson, we will emphasize objective setting. So you see all the dimensions and the areas that we have to take into consideration when we are planning a unit lesson to teach a 70 period or 70 minutes period or 1 hour period of teaching. We will put emphasis on that. And so prepare yourself another time when we shall be privileged to look at lesson planning when we go into our unit 3 and do the assessment thereof. Thank you once again, and prepare that by the grace of God we can meet. So read through when you download, look at it, read through, send comments so we can see we are operating at the same wavelength. Thank you once again.